Okay. No. First up, Senator Onder here. Oh, he is. He's already sitting there. I can't see you on the other side of Holzman's head. It's huge. And Holzman loves to sit there. Despite his bills wanting to be heard, he continues to block my view of the committee hearing. This morning we're going to start off with Senate Bill 305. Senator Onder, good morning.
Let me take the roll first.
Adam, please take the roll. We got a bunch of people here.
All right, Senator Kehoe.
Here.
Senator Emery. Here. Senator Cunningham. Here. Senator Kraus. Senator Riddle. Senator Romine. Here. Senator Schatz. Here. Senator Wallingford. Here. Senator Holzman. Here. Senator Kevney. Here. And Senator Sifton. You're good. You got it. Just
for committee members and folks in the audience, it's a crazy day with committee hearings. I know a lot of people have to come and go. Certainly understand that. Just wanted to make sure everybody here understood it wasn't out of disrespect to anybody's bill. Senator Onder, please continue.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Bob Onder representing the 2nd Senatorial District in St. Charles County. I'm here to present Senate Bill 305. Senate Bill 305 concerns valuation of telecom assets for state personal property tax purposes. This bill aims to address an issue of tax fairness. Traditional telecom companies, referred to in statute as phone companies, and a few other companies providing similar services, are assessed by the State Tax Commission, and they are valued using a hybrid valuation methodology which considers a cost approach and an income approach. In other words, the assessment by the State Tax Commission is based on, again, the cost of the asset and by the income the asset is generating. On the other hand, most cable TV companies and wireless providers are assessed by a pure cost method known as MACRS, or Modified Accelerated Cost Recovery System. So from our accounting course in high school or college, there are various depreciation methods, and again, MACRS is the one called for by statute. MACRS allows for a faster rate of depreciation for assets than the State Tax Commission allows for telecom companies or phone companies. Faster depreciation means a smaller amount of assets subject to tax and therefore a smaller tax bill. So a traditional phone company would be paying more for an identical amount of assets than their competitors in the wireless or cable industry. So Senate Bill 305 adds language to the current statute governing assessment of telephone companies, allowing those companies to either be taxed by the current system or by the MACRS depreciation schedule. Again, this is an issue of fairness. The principle is that two taxpayers in substantially similar position ought to be taxed in the same way. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any questions for the bill sponsor? Senator Holzman.
Thank you. What is the impactful fiscal note?
Yeah. It's the figures I have are that in 2014, all telecom companies assessed by the State Tax Commission paid about $34 million in taxes. So it's estimated that this bill would reduce that tax bill by about 25%. So with this assumption, the impact would be about $8.5 million.
About $8.5 million to GR?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, no, not to mostly to local governments, so municipalities, counties, and so on.
Senator Wallingford.
Yeah, thank you. On the last page, section 5, beginning line 43, I wonder if you could just kind of straighten me out here, not being an attorney.
Okay.
It says, notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, telephone company shall annually, so to me that says they have to, and then
right,
be assessed using methodology for property tax purposes provided for pursuant to this section. And it says or may annually. So one shall and one is may. The first one you have to do, and it sounds like the second one is optional. Is that,
okay,
could you explain that to me a little bit?
Shall annually be assessed by the method in this statute, which is the current tax treatment. Let's see, where's the or? Or may annually elect to be assessed using the methodology. I agree. Grammatically, that's not the clearest, but it's the or is giving them the choice of electing to be taxed by the MACRS method.
So they shall do the first part, but they may do the second one if
yeah,
they
and
want
the
to.
alternative,
But you have
yeah.
to do the first part.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Senator Romine?
Proportionally, again, do we know what separates the dollar amount from local tax and state tax? Do we have?
We don't. You know, a fiscal note was prepared here, and it has zeros everywhere, but you know, which isn't correct. So we don't really have the breakout as to what it would be. You know, are you asking county versus municipalities versus school districts? I don't have that breakdown.
Because then we'll start hearing from our school districts and local municipalities in a big way if that
Right.
number is significant. So I just want to
Right.
be prepared.
Yeah. No, of course, the remedy, of course, if we do this to address, the inequity, of course, then if more revenue is needed, a small increase in assessment would be the remedy for that.
Well, I've been in business 27 years, and we had to make the transition into makers many
Right.
years ago by federal requirements on our business. But it is a more standardized, more recognized method of depreciation and business modeling. So it makes sense what you're trying to do.
Yeah, the method, the state tax commission method, and one of my witnesses can probably give you more here. I think it's almost a historical accident, early 1900s. That's the way it was done, and then, as you point out, the makers is the more modern, if you will, method, and that historical accident results in the traditional telecom or phone companies being somewhat overtaxed compared to their competitors.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions for the bill's sponsor? Senator Wallingford?
Maybe I should have gone to law school because this bothers me. Again, going back to my original question,
Yes.
because we say "or," that means you don't have to do the first part. If it said
Well, that is true.
If it said "and," then you can do that and you can do the other. But if it says "or," it sounds like you have a choice. But the first one says "shall."
Well, let's see. They shall be assessed. They're going to be assessed one way or another. So the question is, they'll be assessed by methodology A or by methodology B. So
But
I
if
think
the first
I
one's
think
A,
grammatically it's okay.
okay. I'm not the attorney, so I
Yeah,
trust your judgment.
yeah. I know. Legal language can be tricky, but I think it's fairly clear. Shall be assessed by, old methodology, or may elect to be assessed by new methodology. So I think that's clear.
With no offense to the bill's sponsor,
Yeah.
any of the attorneys in the room, Senator Wallingford, I'd hate to see your distinguished career jeopardized by obtaining a law degree. We have a note from research who is very good at our trustee staff over on the table saying it is correct. So, thank you, Kayla.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the bill sponsor? Seeing none, anyone here to testify in favor of Senate Bill 305, please come forward. And I would remind everybody, please fill out witness forms and turn them in. Thank you. Good morning.
Our witness did wear his sneakers.
That's right. Whenever your wife represents American Cancer, you're kind of mandated to do that. Good morning. Richard Moore on behalf of CenturyLink, here to speak in favor of the bill. In today's high-tech world, there's almost no difference in the services a telephone company offers and those offered by non-telephone communication companies. For example, telephone companies and cable companies all provide high-speed internet service, video service, and telephone service. In addition, many other communications companies like wireless internet providers and standalone internet providers offer high-speed internet. Communication providers generally provide the same service over the same infrastructure in the same communities and are in competition with one another. However, in regard to personal property tax, communication companies are treated differently depending on whether the company, according to the State Tax Commission, is a telephone company or not. This bill provides a way for telephone companies to pay the same amount of taxes as our competitors pay on the same item. For example, if CenturyLink and a competitor, let's say a cable company, buy the exact same 1,000-foot line of fiber on the same day from the same retailer, install it on the same day, and everything is exactly the same, whenever it comes time to pay the annual personal property tax on those assets, CenturyLink on average will pay approximately 25% more than our competitor. You can replace this example with any personal property asset you like, a service truck, a computer, etc. This is due to the fact A telephone company's assets are valued determining both an income and a cost approach. However, county assessors, according to statute, just use a straight line depreciation cost approach. This treatment began in 2005 when a law was created, the Maker's Law, which benefited both county assessors and all businesses which are assessed by a county assessor by simplifying the process of establishing value of tangible personal property. In every other industry except communication providers, all competitors are either assessed by the State Tax Commission or the county assessors, but not some companies by one and some companies by the other. And that is the problem of which we are here to address. Historically, this disparity comes from the fact that the section of law which prescribes how telephone companies are assessed was created in 1909 when competition did not exist and the only communication services were telegraph and telephone services. In the early 1900s, the General Assembly decided that telephone companies cross county lines, had more of a statewide presence, and should be assessed by the State Tax Commission rather than by each individual county assessor the company had assets located in. Recently, as competition has come into the communications industry, companies like cable TV, internet, and wireless companies began to locate throughout the state, yet their personal property business assets are assessed by the local assessor according to the current state law using a straight line accelerated depreciation schedule that results in their assets, which are exactly identical to our assets, being depreciated quicker than the asset owned by the telephone company. Faster depreciation means that there are less assets to take to tax, and therefore the tax bill is less. I provided the chairman a handout that if you have it in front of you, you might look at it at this time.
Committee has that.
At the top of it, if you look in the box at the top left corner, there's 3 items of property that county assessors utilize when determining a value of a company, as opposed to the entire top line, including those 3, is what the State Tax Commission looks at. So they bring in intangible personal property to determine value of a company. So we're treated differently in that regard. Further, whenever the county assessor looks at those first 3 boxes, they use only the cost approach to determine what the value is, less depreciation as established by statute. Where the State Tax Commission utilizes that same approach, but if the income stream of that asset is more than the cost approach, we also pay the taxes based on that higher income stream. And if you look at the bottom graph, this is a kind of a depiction of what this means. There are various types of property and lifespans of those properties as far as taxes are concerned. I picked a 10-year depreciation piece of property. If you look at the red line, that is what our competitors pay today according to this statute. If you look at the blue line, it can fluctuate depending on what the income stream of that asset is. A good example, and I know that we're not in the taxi service industry, but think of a taxi. If both the cable company and a telephone company bought the same exact taxi for their business, the taxi would be depreciated that is owned by like a cable company according to the red line, where the income that is the true value of a taxi cab, it goes up and down depending on the ability of it to earn income. And so that is brought into the assessment for the assessed valuation of our property, which shows the disparity between us and them. Does that make sense to people? If you turn that into a piece of fiber or any other personal property asset, that is how it applies to my company. We believe this bill is necessary so that the tax law of the state is uniformly applied to all communication companies. If the analysis ended here, this would likely not be a controversial piece of legislation. However, with less personal property taxes being paid, the recipients of those dollars will receive less. Thus, local governments and education will likely be opposed to the legislation because they are the recipients of personal property tax revenues. Telecommunication companies, in fact, all businesses, believe the tax laws of Missouri should treat like companies the same regarding property taxes. Without equal treatment, companies like mine are at a competitive disadvantage. The way these local political subdivisions can recuperate a slightly lower revenue stream is by slightly raising the tax levy, which they currently have authority to do, which funds their needs and treats everyone fairly. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Richard. Any questions for this witness, Senator Schatz?
If you look at just your company in general, in this process when you're being taxed right now, and as long as you took your, and I'll try to run this analogy, your new investment that you have, currently I don't know what your tax base is. I'm not sure if you can provide that to us. But obviously within under this scenario, I mean, how are you going to begin a depreciation schedule on some assets that are already been placed? I mean, how will you adapt to that because of these assets that are already out there that have been currently under this particular method, and then adopt to a method now that you're going to go to a depreciation schedule? Where are you going to start where will be the mark at which you start depreciating the current assets that are in the ground right now?
So with an original assessment case at the State Tax Commission, they take a snapshot in time, January 1st of any given year. What are the assets that are owned at that time? And currently, you go through a process in which you provide evidence, and the State Tax Commission takes a look at everything within that evidence to determine a value. What would happen if this would become law is January 1st, let's say 2016, they're going to take a snapshot of our business personal property, and let's say that something is 6 years old. Well, it would fall on the depreciation scale at 6 years, and then you would know what the value of that individual asset would be.
So you would have to go back to the value when you placed it, the original cost to place it at that point in time. Then you would take 6 years, and at that point, then it would be on the scale.
Right.
And you would pay tax according to that. And then at the end of 10 years, there would be no tax going forward.
Well, that's not true. There's a salvage value, and if you look at that red line, you pay taxes as long as you own that at a salvage value.
Yeah, very minimal. It's at that
Right.
point, yeah.
So it's approximately on a $100 piece of investment, it's about $15 that you would continue to pay.
And I do think the problem that we're going to have here is that determining how is that going to impact local government, schools, and things of that nature, that obviously that's going to be a big, I understand the disparity. Maybe we should get everybody else to the same method you guys are going under
I would
too.
be surprised to see a tax bill come out of the Missouri General Assembly.
Well, I would be surprised, but I could see where I get your point, that everybody should be treated the same, but...
Right. And, we appreciate that, and we don't have a problem with the State Tax Commission. We don't have a problem with the local assessors. We don't have a problem with the political subdivisions that rely on revenue. We think that all of those are doing their job and doing it correctly. The local political subdivisions, however, have a relief remedy if this bill becomes effective, and that is to slightly raise the levy to make up.
That is, if they can get that done by a vote of the people. They obviously have to go to the vote of their constituents in order to make that happen.
Right.
Yeah. There's a remedy, but it's sometimes difficult.
Senator Sifton.
Well, and on that point, in fairness, there are some local subdivisions that probably are not levying at the full voter authorized amount. Those subdivisions could simply roll up their levy now. At the same time, in so doing,
right.
You don't go to the voters. You're just doing what the voters have already approved. Mm-hmm. But you are shifting the tax burden, and I think that's something this committee needs to weigh. But I appreciate the concern of wanting to have a level playing field in the industry.
Further questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Next person to testify in favor of Senate Bill 305. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Rick Teltorst, representing the Missouri Telecommunications Industry Association. I don't really have anything to add to Mr. Moore's comments, other than to point out the obvious, that this tax treatment would apply to every telephone carrier in the state, whether they were a cooperative or privately owned, and it would have the effect of treating us, as Mr. Moore pointed out, equal to our competitors.
Any questions for this witness? Thank you, Rick.
I also have a witness appearance form on behalf of Scott Swain with Verizon.
All right, just leave it there. We'll put him on record. Anyone else to testify in favor of Senate Bill 305? Going once? Going twice. Anyone here to testify against Senate Bill 305? Please come forward. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Richard Sheets with the Missouri Municipal League, and our main concern has been brought up by the committee, the sudden hit on local governments. Again, to recoup that funds, those funds would require going to the voters and asking them to raise the property tax, and that's not always an easy proposition. Understand the fairness aspect and the desire for those companies to have some kind of equal assessment. However, the impact on local governments would be tremendous. Particularly some districts, special districts, really rely on property tax as their main source, and would just have a severe impact on local services. I'll try to answer any questions.
Questions for this witness, Senator Romine?
Do you have an idea of the cost or significant impact? What percentage of revenue lost?
I don't have that information right before me, but I certainly will try to get that for the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Emery.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Richard, is there I can't envision a way to, I guess, progress to this change. Do you know if have you thought about whether this would have to happen all at once, or whether, it seems like there would be a lot of double accounting if they tried to do this over a 2 or 3 year period. I
haven't given it much thought, but it would seem to be a little bit.
Your first comment was the instant impact.
Well, maybe it'll be over a period. I can't tell you over how long of a period, but it would be. Just my estimation, it would be a relatively short period. I can't imagine it would be over a long period of time.
And you really don't have a sense of what percentage of their property tax base this would represent?
Not at this time, but
okay.
I will get
That's
that.
what you're working on. Okay.
I will.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Others to testify against Senate Bill 305. Good morning.
Good morning. Mike Reed, Missouri School Board Association. Echoing what Richard had said, I understand this may take a hit on us. Senator, one of the figures I've heard is about an $18 million figure, but I'll find that, and then that's then prorated over school districts. I can't answer the fairness question. That's something else. All I can say is that if we lose that money, we have to go back to the taxpayers to raise our levy. And so it's a shifting of where the taxes are coming from.
Senator Emery.
Thanks. Thanks, Mike. I guess same question. So $18 million is the number you're working with. What's that out of a total of property taxes statewide?
I can't give you that because I just got this figure about 15 minutes ago when we were working on it. But I will get that figure to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Senator Schatz?
I'm assuming that's just strictly related to schools. That doesn't account for any. That number's not. That 18 million is only accounting for the school. What's the impact on the schools?
I think that's a school. Yes. Okay. I think that's correct.
Senator Keaveney.
That 18 million's the first year, or until this thing's completely implemented?
The first year is my understanding. The first year is my understanding.
Okay.
But I will get that figure.
My only thinking is I think the first year is the big hit, and then because they got all the Senator Schatz said.
After that, then
they've got all the already equipment that they've started depreciating on.
Understand.
They'll catch up the first year, and then after that, it should taper off.
But I'll get that figure and a projection on that.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you, Mike. Anyone else here to testify against Senate Bill 305?
Morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Michael Grote appearing on behalf of Boone County. We simply the same concerns you've already heard. We don't have those figures yet. I know since the question will come, we don't have those figures. I've asked our assessor to put those together and see what we think the impact will be to Boone County. And as soon as I have those, I'll distribute them to the committee. But we're just concerned about the potential impact this will have, and that, again, our only recourse is to increase local taxes.
Any questions for this witness? Thank you, Michael. Others here to testify against Senate Bill 305? Going once, going twice. Anyone here for limited informational testimony purposes on Senate Bill 305? Information? Senator Onder, any closing comments?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I'd like to point out the total amount of personal property tax paid by telecom companies right now is $34 million. So I think that 18 million estimate is very high. And of course, I'd remind everyone that that's spread over 115 counties, hundreds of municipalities, and 520 school districts. So although I do understand the concern about revenue streams, I think tremendous impact on revenue streams, I think maybe a little overestimated. So thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 305. Senator Emery, if you would.
What's our bill number? 456. And we'll move to Senate Bill 456. Senator Kehoe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, for the record, Mike Kehoe representing Missouri 6th Senatorial District, here to present to you this morning Senate Bill 456. Senate Bill 456 is something that I am very familiar with. It's a small business frozen capital issue is what I will tell you for those of you who have been around issues where you're surrounded by cash flow, et cetera. It has to deal with licensed vehicle dealers in the states. This state being able to optionally sell a vehicle that they do not have a title for. Currently, Missouri law says if you trade a car in or you obtain a vehicle to resell it, you have to have a title. Due to an unbelievable amount of reasons anymore these days, sometimes you take a car in and you do not have the title yet. It could be at a lien source. It could be in a customer's lockbox. They might have lost it. You have to apply for duplicate title. There's lots of reasons. And what happens is automobile dealers are no different than any other small business. Their capital is really tied up in that trade-in. It's a frozen capital issue when you cannot move that unit. So Missouri Auto Dealers Association, many statewide dealers got together with stakeholders on Senate Bill 456 for the last several months in meetings and meetings and meetings, hours and hours, literally, with insurance industries, finance institutions, Department of Revenue. I'd like to thank all those folks to get together to try to come up with a solution. And what 456 quickly does, and I'll let those here to testify tell you more, it takes the amount of time that you have to provide the title to 60 days. So the temporary permit now that you get when you buy a vehicle is a 30-day temporary permit. Revenue is working on this solution. We do expect a committee sub, but the intent by the time we're done with this is that Revenue will have a 60-day temporary permit only for those cars that we don't have the title to. A lot of cars we deliver, obviously, we do have the title to, and it's not an issue. Certificate of ownership. Currently, certificate has to be applied for within 30 days. This bill changes the 30-day requirement to 30 days after receiving title from the dealership if vehicle was brought in without a title. And then there's dealer requirements. We believe a consumer protection piece is if a dealer wants to be able to participate in this, it's 100% optional. It's not a mandate. But to do that, we believe a consumer protection piece would be that they up their bonding requirement. Right now, when they apply for a Missouri dealer's license, they're required to obtain a $25,000 bond. If dealers wanted to participate in this, they would be required to submit a $100,000 bond. They would have to provide notice to the buyer and Department of Revenue of sale without title. And dealers assume the responsibility if they're unable to deliver a certificate of ownership at the end of the day. Again, I'd be happy to answer any questions. This is becoming a massive problem, and in a business like everybody else's business where margins are getting tighter and tighter every day, the cost of carrying this inventory becomes a major cost, and the ability to go out and sell that vehicle to customers would certainly help some of these small businesses. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Senator Schatz.
What's the biggest prohibiting factor when of these titles not being available? When someone comes to trade a car or whatever, what is the biggest problem there?
It's amazing. Most people lose them. I mean, that's the most common. They don't actually ever end up admitting that. They just misplaced the title. They don't remember what they did with it. And so that would be my, but I mean, legitimate we see all kinds of things. We see military families who have been transferred from one location to another, and they might have got title when they transferred the first time and not the second time, and that state didn't send them a title. We see a lot of, and this is nothing against local finance institutions, Missouri bankers, for instance, are very good, but some people do finance their cars with a national, maybe online financial institution or a larger institution, and getting a hold of somebody who cares and answers the phone and speaks English in some of those places and having them send you the title with the payoff, that becomes a big issue.
Well, obviously, you have lien releases and things in that nature. All of them become problematic in the process.
Yeah, because if you're huge bank B, whatever your name is, you're dealing with lots of stuff. Some dealer from Joplin, Missouri, or from St. Clair calling huge bank B, whose clearinghouse is in Omaha, Nebraska, trying to get a payoff and send a title. It doesn't become their top priority of the day. So you eventually get those. I mean, we eventually work through those, but sometimes it takes 40 or 45 days to get it. And the reality of the situation is that Senator Riddle comes into our dealership and says, you just traded for that car 10 days ago, and I'd like to buy it for my husband because he needs a new truck, because it has a cracked windshield and the heater doesn't work and it wobbles when it goes down the road, which is exactly what his current truck does. And I say, Jeannie, I'd love to sell that to you, but I can't. I don't have a title yet. What do you mean? We bought lots of cars from you. I'm coming in next week with my next-door neighbor. They're buying it. Why won't you sell me that car? The purchaser never understands no, and the dealer hates to say no. So the real world scenario is dealers are trying to figure out a way around this every day right now. This would just legally give them a remedy to make that decision.
Or the other burden could be placed upon the individual who owns the car. And I know that, typically, and I've experienced some of those same difficulties, out of state and different titling situations, and it's a complete nightmare. But in the event that the dealership doesn't get their obligation to provide title in 60 days, for whatever reason that may be, what is the remedy for the individual that bought the car? Is there one
well, the dealer would be liable for that.
They
would be liable for producing that vehicle without the title. That would be one of the options, yes. Or trade it in for something else. There's a variety of ways they can handle that. But they would be liable, not the customer.
Okay.
Other questions? Senator Cunningham.
Senator Cunningham. Yes. Well, to Senator Cunningham's point, I mean, I'm sure there's a great American senator who has filed a bill on electronic lien releases. That would satisfy at least 50% of our problems. We'd love to see that happen along with electronic titling, and the computer systems within this state and other states, quite frankly, aren't ready to do that. But if we ever get to that point, the bankers would be happy, insurance companies would be happy, dealers would be happy, a lot of people would be happy if we ever get to that point. Yeah, yes, it can be. If we get to that stage, yes.
Anything else, Senator Cunningham? Senator Cunningham, are you still questioning? You're done. Okay. Any other questions for this witness? Senator, just a quick question. So right now, if my mother wants to sell her car and she can't find the title, how much trouble is it for her to get a new title?
It's not, in an average situation like that, you can go get a duplicate title. There's a process with Department of Revenue to do that. In Revenue's defense, they're behind on issuing duplicate titles and straightening out title problems. And so it can take some time, but if I was a dealer and I was trading that car in and knew the background of it, that would be a risk I would take. I would know that I'll eventually get that title, and I'd probably resell your car if this bill were to pass. There will be situations where I don't know the customer, I have no faith in what they're telling me, and I probably would not resell their car until I made sure I had the title. But Revenue has a process in place to get a duplicate title for lost or stolen titles, and it does work, but it unfortunately takes some time.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Seeing none, are there witnesses in support of Senate Bill 456? Please let me just remind everyone to be sure and fill out a witness form.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Doug Smith with Missouri Automobile Dealers Association. I'd like to take the opportunity to testify in support of this bill. I would echo Senator Kehoe's comments also. We worked with a lot of stakeholders on this issue. It is a rather large problem with our members. We also feel that this benefits both our membership and the consumers. Because of the fact that they're not allowed to sell vehicles if they're not possessing the title. And it also, one other a point I would make is this gets us in line with a couple of our biggest competitors for car sales. Kansas has a 60-day allowance, and the state of Illinois has a 21-day allowance. So it keeps a lot of buyers on the border sides of the state from crossing over and purchasing vehicles in the other states.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Smith. Any other witnesses in support?
Good morning, Craig Overfelt with the Missouri Bankers Association. I want to thank the Senator and everybody else for all the hard work on this bill. Banks are very involved in this whole process, and we look forward to continuing to try to improve the system. It is an issue there, and I think long term, keep working on it, keep moving forward, and all the consumers and Missourians and everybody involved will benefit. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Overfelt? Seeing none, thank you
Thank
for your
you.
testimony. Next witness in support.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is David Monahan. I'm a registered lobbyist for American Family Insurance. We've been part of the stakeholders group as well, and we appreciate the work all the folks have put in on it. We've been working on this bill for actually several months, and of course, the more you send it off, sometimes you get different feedback, and we got some feedback about a couple weeks ago about one issue I do want to raise here. We're working with the auto dealers on trying to come up with a solution to that issue, and they've promised to work with us. The issue is, after somebody has purchased one of those vehicles, it makes sense to a certain degree to say they cannot sell it to a subsequent purchaser until the titles catch up. That kind of makes sense. The problem for us in that situation is we're going to have one of those vehicles insured, and within the time before the title catches up, they get into an accident and have a total loss. And generally, the way the settlement of a total loss claim is, you give us the title of the vehicle, we give you what we think the actual cash value of the vehicle is. And so there has to be some type of consumer protection in there. Otherwise, people are going to be furious at auto dealers and insurance companies that we don't pay claims in that situation. And then that goes to the next step. Now we have it, and we can't transfer it. And frankly, the same reason the auto dealers want to be able to do something on the front end, we don't want to be in the salvage business. There's been a lot of bills that have come through this legislature in the last couple of years to really speed the process to get for insurers to sell salvage, and Senator Keough's been very helpful on that. And the last thing we want to do is sit on it for a while. So I don't know the best remedy for that, but the bottom line is we want to make sure, certainly for the citizen, because otherwise they're going to be furious at everybody out there, because we can't give them $10,000 for something and on a promise that we may get a title down the line. So we want to at least be able to extend the bill to say that this quasi-title, I'm not trying to pick on it, but that type of thing, that we can settle a claim, but then we also want to have a way that we're compensated in case that vehicle has to be in storage for a few months, and if maybe the title never does get to us. That may be a long explanation, but we have not had a chance to speak about that, Senator, but I think it's something we can fix.
I think Senator Romine has a question.
I know on the back of the title there's, 3 assignment spaces that the title can be signed over and over and over. I mean, could this be satisfied with an affidavit that has the same type of stipulation through the process?
I think the first step is really fairly easy to fix, that basically would be able to assign that whatever we're calling this interim type of titling type thing. The question that becomes, and we actually have language that we've put together for that, and I think that it takes care of that. The problem is, for us, we have to figure out a remedy for the insurer. If we go ahead and pay the claim, now we have this salvage, and what do we do with that salvage while we're waiting for the titles to catch up? And frankly, we believe that, we don't want to have to pay for all that storage and that type of thing, because it's just going to reduce the value of the salvage. And so I think the auto dealer said they're willing to work with us on trying to figure out a solution for that situation. I don't know if I answered your question, Senator, but
I believe so. I think Senator Holzman's working on a salvage title bill, but that's a different story. Thank you.
Other questions for this witness? Yeah, Senator Schatz.
You bring up an interesting point there, that obviously this problem becomes perpetuated worse down the line the further you get removed from the actual title. That in the event of what you just stated there could happen, that car gets sold, you insure it, it gets wrecked, we still don't have a title situation. That's probably and again, I could see that potentially, being problematic from the insurance standpoint, obviously. But again, I'm only asking the question. I know there's a lot of smart people who have thought about this issue. But if we prohibited someone from selling or transferring until they actually had a title, wouldn't that stop your problem and any other problem that goes on here? And maybe Senator can answer this. Is that problematic for us as people going across the borders and selling cars, as opposed to saying, you know what, we're going to prohibit anyone from selling a car until they can provide title. I don't think you can sell real estate or anything like that until you've done a title search or you've done things like that to where we say, okay, you actually are the owner of this thing, and we're not going to have a transaction until we have that. I mean,
Currently, when a dealer takes a car in, before they resell it under any circumstance, they go through several different resources for title search, make sure that Dave, in this instance, owned that car, he didn't have child support liens, et cetera, that there is good title to the vehicle he's trading in out there. However, it's been misplaced or lost or whatever, and so that's how the dealer makes a decision if he goes forward.
So a dealer does have the opportunity to do an extensive research on the individual and say, okay, before I make the transaction, I'm going to do my due diligence and say, yes, there is clear title to this. Right. I don't have some outlying bank out there that's not going to release this, and that prolongs this process out,
We have that ability, and obviously a dealer is going to make an option. If they think that there's a problem getting a title and they know they're on the hook on the backside, to your earlier question, they're not going to take the risk of delivering that car. I mean, so they'll be able to make that decision based on what they know about where the title is. So, because you do sometimes do that research and you're uncomfortable with what you find. So
what if I'll ask this, what if you're one of these more risky operators out there that wants to take those risks and then puts the insurance companies at risk by in that situation?
That's why you have to get a higher bonding requirement to be able to participate in this program. Bonding companies take that seriously when you want to triple or quadruple the amount of bond you currently have to get for a license. So that will be somewhat of a filter for viable dealers to be able to produce that bonding mechanism. And as Dave said on this issue, it was brought up to me by the association. We feel like we can work through that. There's a couple other things we're fine-tuning with DOR, but I think we can work through some solutions to make this consumer protection and the insurance industry covered.
Okay.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Are there other witnesses in support of Senate Bill 456? Are there any witnesses in opposition to Senate Bill 456? Any information witnesses? Seeing none, Senator, do you have any words to close? And I presume you're going to be working on a substitute.
Yeah, as was mentioned, all the stakeholders, including Department of Revenue, have been very good to work with. But it's a complicated issue, and like any bill that goes through this body, everybody wants to think of the worst-case scenario, and you have to be prepared for that. And as we start thinking about that over the several months, we've addressed most of those, but we feel like the sub will clean up some of these other issues that are hanging out. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. That concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 456. No further business before the committee. We stand adjourned.